Good evening. I'm Gracelyn Guyol, and welcome to Restoring Health Holistically. This evening's show is about holistic diabetes and pre-diabetes treatment. And our guest is Dr. Gwenn Rosenberg, who's a naturopathic doctor in Mystic. Welcome, Gwenn.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here.
Gwenn completed her residency with Bastyr University and then came to Connecticut. She worked at before she came to Connecticut, she worked at a community clinic in Seattle and an Indian Health Service clinic in Northern California. She has also worked on an ambulance in Philadelphia, served on the board of the Center for Peace and Global Citizenship, and herded cows in Tanzania. She is committed to public education about diabetes and metabolic syndrome, so she gives talks and leads groups at local libraries and the YMCA. She works with people who have many different types of health conditions and helps them make positive and sustainable changes. Is diabetes treatment and prevention all about food choices?
Absolutely not. Many people think about food choices as the first thing when they think about diabetes treatment, and it's very important. I'm not saying that it's not one of the most important things when we think about treating diabetes, but we also need to think about a lot of things that are sometimes surprising to people, including stress, including sleep, including muscle mass and muscle building, as well as food choices.
And how does type 2 diabetes develop?
Type 2 diabetes develops over many years, many months, many years. Many people think that it's something that happens and then you just have diabetes. But in fact, it's a slow progress where, and this is specific to type 2 diabetes. So type 1 diabetes has a very different progression, I should say. Type 2 diabetes develops over time as the cells stop accepting insulin. So the blood sugar gets kind of stuck in the blood vessel and is unable to enter the cells and feed the cells, and it stays in the blood vessel where it causes some problems.
So explain a little bit why the cell stops taking it, because it's basically it's become insulin resistant.
That's correct.
Talk about what causes that.
So what happens? One of the best analogies I ever heard about insulin resistance was that it happens a lot like if you had door-to-door salespeople, and you can imagine there's some communities, and this doesn't happen as much anymore,
today,
but
right.
There's some communities where people would bring things like bread or vegetables or something that they're selling to the doors of people's homes, and so you can imagine if you had one knock on the door every day and someone was offering bread, you might say, oh, that's wonderful, and you would invite them in and you would buy their bread. If you had 50 people knock on your door every day, you might you would just stop opening the door because you would get sort of overwhelmed. Yeah. And so your cells do a very similar thing. What insulin does is it goes to the cells and it tries to make a bridge from the blood vessel to the cell to try to get the sugar from the blood into the cells to feed the cell. And so usually the cell, if the cell is not insulin resistant, the cell accepts the insulin and then allows that blood sugar to come into the cell. If the cell is insulin resistant, it's like the person who's had too many door-to-door salespeople that says, no way, go away, I've had enough of you knocking on my door. That's why. So it just stops accepting that insulin.
Okay, so what does pre-diabetes mean?
Pre-diabetes is a time when when there's kind of a mix of things. So diabetes is when that's more advanced. There's more of this happening where the cells are not taking up the insulin, or at some later stages there's not enough insulin there because there's been such high insulin levels for so long they start to deplete. Pre-diabetes is actually a state where the blood sugars are running higher than normal. So they're running the insulin system is unable to really modulate the blood sugar levels because some of the cells are not taking up the insulin as well. So then the blood sugar starts to go up, but it's not quite to the levels of diabetes. That's why we call it pre-diabetes.
Okay.
And once someone is in a pre-diabetic state, it means that they have a high risk of developing diabetes, but it absolutely does not mean that they are definitely going to
necessarily
develop.
will. This is where they can influence it.
Exactly.
In the pre-stage. Okay. How does lack of sleep contribute to diabetes. This was interesting that you mentioned this to me, and I'm intrigued.
Yeah, a lot of people are quite surprised by this because we think about activity, we think about physical activity, and we think of sleep as being the opposite of physical activity. In fact, when it comes to diabetes, sleep is actually, we have some studies dating back into the 70s about, we take normal healthy volunteers who don't have any trouble regulating blood sugar in their bodies, and we subject them to, or not we, but the scientists at the time, subjected them to limited sleep. So in some studies it was 6 hours, in some studies it was entire sleep deprivation. There we have varying levels of sleep deprivation that occurred. And what we see is that after a few days of doing this, even normal, healthy, athletic, lean folks will start to develop what looks like prediabetes. So their blood sugars will start to increase. They'll start to have some insulin resistance. And this is just from sleep deprivation alone.
And does sleep deprivation cause stress? Is that a stress response? This from lack of sleep?
Absolutely. There is a little more of a stress response. We're going to talk later a little bit about cortisol, which is also really an important player in having elevated blood sugars related to stress. But particularly, one way that we see stress play out in lack of sleep is actually we have two hormones. One is called leptin, the other one's called Gracelyn. Leptin is a hormone that's sort of our hormone of satisfaction. So it makes us feel full when we've eaten plenty. It helps us to desire foods that are healthier for us. And what we see is when people have sleep deprivation, that actually their levels of leptin go down, so they stop feeling satisfied with a normal sized portion. We also see that their levels of Gracelyn go up, and Gracelyn is the opposite hormone that makes us crave more of the calorie-dense food, so more of the fatty, sugary,
sugars.
Yep, the quick fuels.
Quick fix,
exactly.
Right.
Yep.
That then goes straight into the cells and makes them insulin resistant.
Exactly. Yep. That creates more of that problem. Yep.
So how much sleep do we need, and how do we improve sleep quality?
So ideally 7 to 9 hours of sleep is what the recommendation is. And I say actually to get enough sleep so that you wake feeling rested. And this is important.
That's a
because,
measure. Yeah, a real one.
A real one, yeah.
Right.
Because a lot of times people will maybe spend 7 to 8, 9 hours in their bed, but say they get up to go to the bathroom 3 times that evening. They might not actually be getting a full 7 to 9 hours of sleep.
Right.
The other things to really think about in terms of sleep quality are sleep apnea is a very big risk factor for diabetes as well as high blood pressure.
Oh, I didn't know it was for diabetes. Okay.
Absolutely. So, and sleep apnea is a description of people who don't get enough air when they're sleeping. So they're not getting enough oxygen while they're sleeping.
Right.
What that might look like is for some people that might be a lot of snoring. For other people, sometimes if someone sleeps near them or has ever seen them sleep, they might notice that they gasp for air.
They stop breathing. My first husband had sleep apnea, and my son from that man had sleep apnea.
Oh, yeah. There is
and
a
was
family.
Blockage in the nose. And they do. He used to fall asleep and then not breathe for about a minute and then gasp, which would wake me up because I'm a light sleeper.
Absolutely.
And then I would have a hard time going back to sleep.
Yep, this is a common experience.
But I have to say another thing too is whenever he had a little too much to drink, it made it 10 times worse.
This is very true as well.
So alcohol impairs that. If you've got the problem, it makes it much worse.
Much worse. The other things that make it much worse are allergies. So if people have an allergic response to something and that is in the room, that tends to make it worse.
And seasonal allergies.
Absolutely. And pet allergies. Also position. If someone's sleeping on their back, they have more of a tendency to have apneic events.
Have their throat close off a little.
Versus when they're on their side. So a lot of those things. We also, in terms of sleep quality, we also need to think about other factors. So many of us have screens and things that we look at, right before bed.
In the bedroom.
Yep, exactly. Which actually do affect how deeply we are able to sleep and how difficult it is for us to fall asleep. The other things that we want to think about are temperature. So this often becomes a challenge within relationships. There's this crazy I always think of it as a really funny trick of nature that women up until they reach perimenopause are often very cold and want the heat turned up, and then all of a sudden everything switches so that now the man is the one saying if it's a woman and man relationship, the man is now the one saying
he's cold.
He's cold, and and the woman wants to open the windows.
Right.
So there's so really that temperature, regulation is really specific to the person and where they are in their life and what their preferences are. But it is better to be a little bit on the chilly side for sleeping rather than on the warm side, because that helps us get deeper sleep.
Oh, does it?
It does, yep.
Okay. And, one of the things that I do in my bedroom, too, is I make sure that I do not have any electromagnetic frequency devices near my head or near where I'm sleeping, because they're even more damaging when you're sleeping than they are when you're awake. Somehow and they can impair your sleep. And this is like radios, televisions, computers, cell phones, having them right next to your bed, that they're still turned off, but they're still receiving stuff from cell towers as they update.
I actually did read about recently. There was some college students or high school students that actually did a study for like a science project about that. They did studies about how well they slept, because they did the sleep tracking, whether they had the phone near them or farther away from them. In terms of the electromagnetic frequencies being important, but also thinking about even small amounts of light that are emitted from things.
Yes, the LED lights are. We have a burglar alarm panel that's on one part of our bedroom, and I made sure that the bed's not facing it, so that we don't see it. In this red light, it's not as bad as some of the blues that seem like to penetrate your eyelids even if they're closed.
Yeah.
So any source of light can impair sleep, depending on the person.
Yeah.
Some people I'm light sensitive, super sensitive. Other people, my husband doesn't. He could, the curtains could be open and he'd still be dead asleep. The curtains are open. I wake when the sun comes up.
Yep. And actually, we do see that changes over time, especially for women. Over time, we see that they become a lot more light sensitive, and that's partially because their pineal gland, which makes melatonin, becomes more sensitive to that light. So they don't need to be having a large source of light for their body to really register that light is present.
Maybe it's because our skin is thinner, too.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know.
Anyways, so what do you suggest people do before they go to bed, besides cover all these devices?
and try to make a quiet and cool environment. Or move them. Is ideally, something like a more relaxed activity. A lot of people are watching TV that might be sort of stimulating right before bed. So something like reading a magazine, or talking with a spouse or a family member, or doing something that's a relaxing activity. So even a shower right before bed is nice. And trying to have the light level go down a bit, about a half an hour before bedtime, so that all those good sleep hormones start to get activated.
Good. Okay. Most diabetics must dramatically change their diet. That's no secret. I think most of them know that. So give us the guidelines, and we have quite a bit of time, so go in detail.
Oh, wonderful, I will. So this is one where I often, when we're talking about food changes for diabetes, we talk about what we shouldn't be eating. And I always feel like that is a tough conversation, because the list is quite long about things that will make diabetes get worse. What I like to focus on is what to eat. So what are the things that are going to be good for people with diabetes? The biggest thing on that list, the biggest category on that list, is vegetables. So when I'm talking about vegetables, I'm talking about vegetables excluding really corn and potatoes. I mean,
high glycemic vegetables.
Exactly. So really bringing in those vegetables and actually using those vegetables to replace some of the foods that we're avoiding is a helpful way to get more nutrients, which also really helps with that insulin sensitivity, helps those cells use insulin more effectively.
Right.
It also helps with function of all of our metabolic processes. The other thing is that vegetables contain high levels of fiber. And fiber, what it does is it helps that sugar to enter into our bloodstream more slowly, because our body has to kind of break down all that fiber to get to the sugars that are inside those vegetables.
Okay.
So it has to work really hard to get there. Versus when you think about something like bread or pasta, where the body doesn't have to work very hard at all.
Sort of melts in your mouth.
Exactly.
You don't have to even chew it much.
Yep. Yep, it doesn't require any work. Go ahead.
So what are some of the good vegetables that
Good
you
vegetables.
really? Yeah.
All of the brassicas, which are broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts. Those are wonderful. Any greens. Kale has been getting a lot of press about being one of the most nutrient-dense foods there are.
Right.
And I think about
Spinach.
spinach is wonderful.
And certain lettuces are higher. Romaine has more nutrients in it than, say, the head lettuce. And chard.
Yep.
Lots of greens.
And root vegetables, so beets and
Carrots.
and a lot of people say, oh, those are the higher glycemic ones, but really when we're looking at the difference between something like beets and carrots or something like macaroni and cheese, we're going to see a big difference in terms of nutrient density as well. And a lot of times people say, oh, I don't know if I can eat that many vegetables. I don't like to prepare food, or I don't have time to prepare food. And one of the ways that I talk about that's really quite easy for getting some more vegetables into one's diet is to actually add a whole a bag of frozen vegetables to whatever you're cooking. So, and sometimes people do this slowly over time, and even if they have family, if they have children or someone in the family who's not very excited about eating vegetables, they'll just sort of slowly over time add more vegetables. Say if they're eating something that usually comes with pasta or rice, start replacing more and more of that pasta and rice with the vegetables. And it's an easy way to trade up, to trade the rices or the pastas for something like a vegetable.
One of the things that I do is I have a little steamer basket that you just put in a pan with some water under it, put a lid on it, and it spreads even enough so that I can have some green beans on this part of the steamer basket, and I can have some broccoli or something on this part of the basket, and carrots over on this part of the basket. So if you have, and so you can have a variety of vegetables that don't have to all be mixed together or don't have to be frozen, and just steam them. It takes 5 to 7 minutes. Is easy.
Yeah.
And you can put things on it, like you can put pesto sauce over it. So there's some really easy ways to fix vegetables that don't require a lot more time or time of cooking either.
Yeah. And I think, when you talked about the pesto sauce, it reminded me, I hear from a lot of people say, oh, I don't really like vegetables. Like, vegetables are gross, they're boring, they're, Well,
they can be sort of boring, but if you're eating them day after day after day. But you can spice them up with salsa. You can put pesto sauce on it. You can. I use a little butter. My naturopathic doctor told me that I could have a little bit of butter, especially when I was having like bread or something, because the fat slows down the sugar, the body processing. So. But not drenched.
In moderation, And it is true, there's a lot you can play with in terms of spices, but I also tell people that if you were ever to eat bread or pasta by itself without anything on it, you would find it quite boring as well.
That's right.
So you think about all the things you put on bread or pasta or rice, and you just can put those things right onto vegetables.
Well, I have friends who do spaghetti squash, and instead of having pasta, they put their spaghetti sauce on the squash. And get the same effect. Because what you're tasting is mostly the sauce.
It's true. It's a slight change in texture, but it really is, the same meal, but just much healthier.
Okay, so then there's Are we other vegetables to cover yet, or are we moving on?
I guess the squashes are a whole good group there too. Again, we get into there's a whole range of things, vegetables, in terms of how much they contain starches or how quickly they digest into sugars. But again, that whole vegetables as a whole are always going to be a better choice than
a better category than pasta, bread, or potatoes.
Exactly.
My sister she's type 2 diabetic, and she tests her blood sugar, and when she ate a baked potato, it had the same reaction as a candy bar.
Wow, isn't that amazing?
Sugar right into her system. So, and I think she was eating it without the skins. I think if you eat it with the skins, it does help. But it's still very refined carb.
It's true. Which actually reminds me of the other big dietary recommendation I say is to avoid a lot of the white foods. So it's a good kind of like easy way to say, is that one of those foods, or is that not one of those foods? Is when foods are white foods, they often means that they're refined. And something like a potato doesn't have to be refined to be white, but something like a bread or a pasta. And we do see that the whole grain foods are lower glycemic, meaning that they go into the bloodstream more slowly. but the really, refined white foods.
Stuff. Well, it's the contrast between white rice and brown rice.
Yep, exactly.
Brown rice still has the hull with all the nutrients on it, and so you're getting much more nutrition. And it's because it's the hull, it's the fibrous part of the rice, so you're still slowing down the entry of the sugars into your system.
Yeah.
So it's that's against the white.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
And so you had using spices and seasonings, salad dressings.
Yeah. Oh, salad dressings. That's another good trick. Is that so? We talked a little bit about things you can just kind of treat vegetables as if they were the pastas or the breads. So you can even put like salad dressings right on top. And a lot of salad dressings, looking at them for what types of oils they have in them. So ideally, it's more of an olive oil base. Olive oil is especially good when you can apply it after you've cooked something. That's where you get the most benefit from it.
So that it's not cooked.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And so adding something like a salad dressing makes the vegetables have quite a flavorful flavorful quality, but then you can be adding just a little bit to get that extra flavor, so that you enjoy the.
And what about desserts, sweet things?
So I think about everything in moderation. So if people are having desserts, when we talk more about exercise and things, this actually balances out a lot of any kind of a dessert intake. But there's a lot to be said for portions when it comes to dessert. So many people, if they go without any dessert at all, say they're at Thanksgiving dinner and everyone else is having dessert and they went to have a small piece. If they go for a walk afterwards, they can absolutely trade that dessert for some extra physical activity. When they're at their own homes, I do encourage them to find new desserts, so new ways to make desserts. One thing that a lot of people that I talk to people about doing blueberries and eating blueberries because they're very good for your blood vessels. They're very therapeutic for diabetes. And so you can actually make something that feels and tastes a lot like ice cream by just taking frozen wild blueberries and putting them in a dish. And sometimes people even put like a little bit of yogurt or even a little bit of whipped cream on the top. And it really, you don't even have to add sugar. It has a really nice sweet flavor to it. It feels like
sweet
ice cream.
cream.
You can even cook those same blueberries and it tastes sort of like a blueberry pie without having to have all of the extra calories and added things on there. Same thing with something like apples. Cooking apples and cinnamon without any added sugar is a really wonderful dessert.
It has a wonderful texture too. And I think when we think of desserts, we're thinking about that texture, that silkiness that's so pleasing.
Yep, it's very true. It's very true. So finding these other ways to make desserts. So even chia pudding is another big one that people make.
I've made some of that.
Oh, you
and
did?
I thought it was great. It had this silky texture like a pudding.
Exactly.
And it had it had a nice sweetness. I thought it was quite good.
Yep. It's a pretty easy one to make too. It's pretty much you just throw it in with whatever type of milks you use, and you've got a pudding a few hours later.
Yes.
Yep. And the other thing that I think about a lot with dessert is actually a lot of times. So it's really thinking about what we're going to desserts or to sweets for. So what I see is often people are looking to desserts or they're craving sweets because they're actually tired. They're actually just feeling quite tired at the end of the day. Sometimes there's a lot more that can be happening in terms of when people are having problems with regulating their blood sugar, that actually they're experiencing a blood sugar drop.
Right before dinner is typical.
Exactly. Late afternoon. So, and sometimes the symptoms that people often feel when their blood sugar drops is sometimes they'll feel a little bit shaky. They might feel a little bit sweaty, anxious, a little bit kind of cloudy-headed or easily disoriented.
Can't think clearly.
Totally. Or my favorite new term is hangry, which kind of speaks for itself. Right. So that they get quite irritable. When their blood sugar is starting to drop. But also sometimes, even outside of the blood sugar dropping, I see that sometimes people are reaching for sweets when actually what their body is looking for, what they are looking for, is really some quick energy. So something
nutrition.
Exactly.
Because you can have eaten a lot of food, but if it's totally devoid of nutrition, your body's going to keep saying, feed me.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And that is very true. That we don't get the same kind of satisfaction.
And
even that, during those times that people are having sugar cravings, often really they might benefit more from doing something else that's relaxing or restorative to help them bring their energy levels up. So that might be, a short walk outside, or some deep breathing, or time with a pet, or time with someone that they care about, or calling a friend. Doing something that gives them that same kind of lift, but it doesn't require them to eat sugar.
Right.
So sometimes I say looking for sweetness elsewhere. So thinking about like things that you can do that feel sweet, but don't actually.
Sweet people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You have a hard time finding them before dinner, though.
It's true. That's also true.
But the other thing that I always did, because I don't know, I have a very fast metabolism and I seem to burn through energy, is I would have a snack about 4 o'clock because I cannot make it from noon until 7 o'clock.
Yep.
And so I have a small snack that has, typically an apple, maybe with a little bit of peanut butter on it, something, a little protein. If you're not allergic to nuts, a handful of nuts. Just things to take that edge off and give you enough fuel to get through until dinner.
Absolutely, yeah. And the way that you talked about that, I could tell that you really plan your snacks, which is really key to success in terms of, once 4 o'clock hits and you're hungry and you need something now, we all know that the easiest foods to get are the real junk foods.
That's right.
So,
open a bag, stuff your face. And there's no way to stop. I mean, it's
but if you
driven.
It's so true. But if you plan your snacks like you do, you can really eat that before you get overly hungry, so that you can then avoid some of those other snacks.
Right, and I don't bite people's head off on cooking dinner.
Also that. It's also good.
Okay. Yep. So I think that's great to the other thing, the walking part, I think is really good, because at the end of the day, the oxygen to your brain will perk you up as much as sugar will.
It's absolutely
true. And it won't keep you, it'll help you sleep later.
Yep, exactly. Yep, it has other benefits, where sugar doesn't really have other benefits.
What makes daily exercise so crucial?
So daily exercise is important on many different levels. So we're going to talk about stress a little bit later in the show, but we also so we know that exercise helps us to manage stress, and there's scientific studies about that, but I think most people can just have had that experience where they're stressed and then they go for a walk and then they don't feel stressed anymore.
That's right. They're much better.
It's a good treatment for stress. But we also know that in exercising, particularly with muscle building, when we work with doing strength training or pushing our muscles. Whenever we build muscle, it helps us to become more insulin sensitive. So the increased muscle mass actually helps our body use the sugar more effectively. So it's very important to do exercise, and particularly to do muscle building exercise, in order to build that muscle mass, so that all day, even when we're sitting here, when we're sleeping, our body is using sugar more effectively.
And so things that people can do to build muscle would include walking, running, jumping rope, playing tennis. I talk about, suggest that people think about exercise as their time to go play, not a workout.
It's so true. A workout sounds like such drudgery.
And you can, for exercise, I do things that I enjoy, and so I look forward to doing it. I play tennis. I love to go for walks, especially in the summertime. Not so much in the winter in Connecticut, but. And so if you, again, plan and think about what you enjoy, even if it's jumping on one of these little trampolines in your house while you're watching TV, if you consider that fun, find something fun and do whatever you think is fun.
Totally. And even like for some people, like finding a class that they really would enjoy doing.
Or the people, socializing. A lot of people won't do it alone because they don't. It's not fun for them to exercise alone. And really, there's some great places around here too, nearby, that are really very positive and really encourage people and help them. I see a lot of folks who maybe never tried doing resistance exercise or muscle building exercises. It's actually quite good to do that with a group or with a trainer, especially at the beginning. Instructions, so you know that you're not hurting yourself.
Exactly. And there's 3 of my favorite places around here that are just so positive and really bring a lot of good.
Them.
Okay, it's all right to do that?
Please.
One is Advantage Fitness. It's an Old Mystic. Another is called Fitnostics. That's in Stonington. And then another is called the Medically Oriented Gym, which is at Independence Physical Therapy. that's more with physical therapists present.
And what town is that?
And that one's also in Mystic.
Okay.
And they're all just wonderful places that really support people of any kind of physical fitness background, and really they're so inviting and so positive. And I see people really gaining a lot of strength, which we know also prevents things like falls, or they really help us throughout time to be able to be
different
healthier.
stages of life. And they would also, if you had a problem, say a physical impairment, they could help you adjust your exercise routine to be able to exercise in spite of, this problem or that problem.
Absolutely, yeah. So those are three wonderful places.
Safely.
And definitely, I do speak with a lot of women who are concerned about bulking up if they do a lot of strength training, and that is not something that we need to be too concerned about. We often see that muscles get toned. Tends to be that the testosterone actually makes the muscles grow quite a lot bigger. So, so really, that's not too much of a concern
for women.
But building muscle mass actually does help their metabolism and does help to prevent diabetes. So,
and it helps prevent weight gain.
It's true. It's true. Yep. It's like because you basically have that calorie burning happening even when you're sitting down or
Because I know in the summertime I have no problem putting on weight because I'm exercising, I'm going for walks on the beach, I'm pretty active gardening. But in the wintertime, when it's cold out and it's not as easy to just go outside and get some exercise, I do notice that if I don't exercise all week long, I start to put on weight. And if I get back to exercising, no problem.
It's really true.
It's that a big part of weight control.
Yeah, very true.
Okay. And okay, let's talk about the S word, stress.
Stress. So there's a lot of talk about stress and about the health risks of stress. And the other thing we need to remember is that we have to be careful about not getting stressed about being stressed. Right? It's that's easy to do. And so there's actually a really wonderful TED talk about that. It's called "Making Stress Your Friend," which I really love because she talks about sort of interacting with your stress differently. So what we know about stress and diabetes is that stress actually will cause your blood sugars to increase because you release a certain hormone called cortisol, which is really what that's designed to do is to respond to stress as say our ancestors would have. So if someone even a few generations ago, one of the main reasons they'd be stressed is if they were going to have some kind of an interaction or a fight with someone else, or if they were going to have a confrontation with something, with an animal or something like that. And so what they would need in a stressful situation would be to have all that sugar coursing through their blood so that their muscles could use it as quickly as possible so that they could run. Yeah, exactly. However, we have now, which is where we all have stress, but we're sitting down and
in an
not
office.
moving in an office, for hours. And so what happens is that stress response causes that release of sugar, and then that sugar just continues to circulate so it doesn't get used by our muscles because we're just not using our muscles at that time. So our stress response is still happening like it needed to happen for our ancestors.
Centuries,
Exactly. But the way that we're responding to it makes it so that stress response causes more problems for us.
And it's my understanding that the way that the body brings the cortisol levels down and back into your body back into balance is by releasing insulin. Is that so?
I'm not sure if there's a complex interaction there between cortisol and insulin, and I'm not sure if actually the release of insulin brings the cortisol levels down, but we do know that the insulin, when cortisol levels are up, it actually blocks the insulin from being released. So then a lot of times you'll get this sort of a flood of insulin after the cortisol levels start to go down. But in terms of the insulin causing the cortisol, I've never heard that before, but it's...
I've heard, it was, and I don't know where I got this from, but I've just understood it that the body brought itself back into homeostasis by releasing insulin. So if you were always spiking your cortisol, you were always getting influxes of insulin to bring back into balance.
To bring that back.
And that's why that you could get, if you were always stressed, you'd put on weight because insulin's the hunger hormone.
Exactly.
And makes you hungry all the time. And also you would become insulin resistant because the body was having to produce too much insulin all the time to bring you back into balance.
I bet that the way that correlation that you're talking about, what I bet is happening there is that that the actual correlation is that cortisol makes your blood sugar go up, and then when your blood sugar goes up because it was released into the bloodstream, then to resolve this whole situation, your body does have to produce lots of insulin to bring that blood sugar back down, to put that blood sugar back into the cells.
Okay.
So I think that might be that it's kind of part of this coming down off of it, but that makes
okay, so you've expanded my understanding of what's going on.
Yep, so like 1, 2, 3. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so what can they do to minimize the effects of stress on blood sugar?
Oh, yes. So in the moment, so say taking that office example that we have, a lot of times people are in their office and they're feeling stressed, and what would happen normally is that blood sugar would be released. It just kind of continues to circulate and causes more insulin resistance and weight gain. What someone can do when they're actually sitting at their desk is they can do things like, even under their table, they can do little exercises like doing calf raises or tightening their muscles without moving them. They can also, ideally, if they feel acutely stressed, they can get up and take a walk around the building, or it's okay to say, like, kind of act like you're going to the bathroom, and that's just a way to move your body, and even while you're in the bathroom, to do a few jumping jacks or squats or something like that, or wall push-ups. Just something to use that sugar that's been mobilized. So the sugar is there for the use of the muscles, but if we don't use it, then it gets deposited, particularly around the middle, is where we see a lot of that weight gain that comes from stress.
That's right, yes. Yes. I've noticed that people working under stress, often I just observed that they maybe put on 10 pounds a year. And if they're always under stress, it doesn't come off.
Yep,
and so every year it gets more and more hard to get it off.
Absolutely.
What about deep breathing to relieve
stress? That's a fantastic way to bring down some of those stress hormones, and particularly deep breathing in a way that is a shorter in-breath and a long out-breath seems to bring people's stress level down quite a bit. So.
And meditation, and if it's constant stress, hypnotherapy, so you can put your fingers together and all of a sudden be unstressed because of the hypnotic suggestion that's put you in that place.
Yeah, that's a wonderful one.
So there's lots of ways of controlling stress if you can't control the environment that's causing it.
True, and even as simply as you're on your computer and you might have pictures of your family and your pets and things like that, and just taking even if it's 5 seconds or 10 seconds to just look at those pictures, to just stop doing everything else and just look through those pictures. Sometimes that will just really also bring down that stress level.
And if you have a friend that always tells you great jokes, laughter's really helpful.
That's also
it's a great stress release.
That's a really good one.
Well, I am delighted that you brought one of your patients with you today, Dave Fuller, and he's going to explain what he's been doing to reverse his diabetes. Is reversal possible if you're from a family with a strong history of diabetes type 2?
Absolutely. I just want to say that's probably the most important take home that I want to say here today, is that pre-diabetes and even early stages of diabetes are absolutely reversible. Even anywhere on the spectrum of pre-diabetes to diabetes, we can move backwards towards feeling better and feeling healthier. Mr. Fuller is a person who has taken this to a level that I have never seen before. He's very proactive. Very proactive. So the story of Mr. Fuller is that he came in and he
welcome, Dave.
Welcome, Dave. He came in just like today. Hello. So Mr. Fuller came in, and I could tell from some of the things we were talking about that it sounded like he might be having some difficulty regulating his blood sugar. So we did some tests, and I got those tests back, and I said, I'm very sorry to tell you, but I think we're going to have to look at medications. I know you want to do natural things, but we're looking at medications here. And he said something very different.
No way. Not happening.
Well, Dave, tell us your story. Where did this start, and where did you head?
Well, I headed to the path that I was going to. One of the things you got to kind of understand is the part of me, I would have always regretted it if I had never tried doing a natural way of doing it. I couldn't have lived with myself.
So you want to do that first?
Yeah, that's kind of, but it's a stubbornness. You got to get it into your head. You're going to change your life. There's no way you're not. as much as you're reversing something that's going wrong, you can't reverse your life once you start the path of getting it together. You got to stay with it. And we actually found a couple of things along the way, but it's a stubbornness. It's a knowing that you're not going to live the way that you were living before.
Well, I would say determined.
Yeah, determined.
My husband calls me stubborn. I say I'm persistent.
Yeah, there you go. That's probably a better way
So
of
there's
putting
different
it.
words we can use to define ourselves. You're a determined person.
Right.
Okay. And so how did you do this? What did you...
Well, one of the things, you have a great thing going on here. The show is going to be wonderful, but it's all of the things that you've been talking about combined into one. When you get past the financial part of living healthy and all of the things that are associated.
Talk about that a little. The cost.
It's
what you did.
It's scary. You guys brought up pastas and things like that. Well, in the real world, that's very easy to live like that because you don't have a lot of money and it's cheap to do. But
it's cheap and it's filling.
Filling, yeah. And so you have to get past the concept of the huge expense, and the results that come afterwards are really what's beneficial about it. But it's a slow process of just changing, altering, taking one bad thing and replacing it with something good over a small. You start with non-GMO foods is a good way to start.
Genetically modified organisms.
And it's a beginning to start to change the way that you eat and the habits that you have. And
there's two words that I heard you say, which process. And it's a process, and it's a learning process as well as a changing process. People can't expect to do this overnight. It is, you get a list of food from your doctor, this is what you need to eat. You get a list of food from your doctor, this is what you need to avoid.
Exactly.
And then you take those with you when you're shopping.
Right, pretty much, yeah.
Because until you get it into your head, you won't remember it all. So you have to, it's a learning process and then you adjusting.
Adjusting to it, exactly. And the results afterwards are far better than any money you might have saved by buying pastas and things like that too. So that's something to keep in mind. But it was more getting up every single day and saying that I'm not going to eat the way that I've been eating, and I'm not going to do it. We also discovered with me, you got to kind of put a couple of things together that I have a severe dairy allergy that is not well known in the diabetic world and not much talked about. But that was bringing my blood sugars so low, fantastically low. How I always thought I just had, an allergy, what do they call it? Lactose intolerance. And never thought much about it, but what I was doing is when my blood sugar's low, I would stuff all these carbohydrates, anything I could get, sugars, everything to get my blood sugar back up, not knowing what I was doing and why. I kind of created my own problem. And after 30 or 40 years of doing that, when she mentioned I had diabetes, I said, no way, it couldn't be, it just can't be. I'm the other way,
Right.
So that's a long habitual thing that you've done, and I had to overcome that, plus the need to change the foods that I eat and the life that I live. You don't have that option of having healthy foods right at your fingertips.
Right. How did you adapt this, having to change your diet to the work that you do? What do you do to get ready to go to work and have something healthy to eat? Yeah, being an
over-the-road driver, it's hard to do that. It's almost impossible. The big step we had to make was, which had some financial part to it also, but it was fairly easy. Get refrigerators, take the food with me.
In coolers.
Instead of buying it in the truck stops.
Where it's very little healthy food available.
Virtually none. You walk in the door of a truck stop and the first thing you see is a 10-inch pizza for $10, and you can eat forever on that when, the salad is about this big and it's stuffed stuffed in a
$7.
corner. Yeah, $70 for that.
Right.
You know, and then the rows and rows of chips and candies, and it's all very unhealthy. So that it was a lot of work, but I made up my mind, and that's what we did: coolers, refrigerators, and install them in the truck, and I bring the food with me.
And you get it in a grocery store, not in a truck stop.
Yeah,
Where
definitely.
it's less expensive, and you can still buy salad stuff all cut up and in bags.
The beauty is, I heard you talking earlier, that the thing is one of the things about driving is there's a lot of boring. It's very boring. And you constantly want to eat something. One of the things that I would suggest to people is celery. Celery is a phenomenal food that you can eat, and you're not going to put on weight with some hummus on it, and get rid of the chips and the soda and all that, which is all those things are contributing to people's blood sugar. You know.
And celery has really nice water in it too, so the juice of it is very healthy for you.
It allows you to salivate, which also helps your digestion, which also brings your blood sugar down.
It actually helps with your blood pressure as well.
Blood pressure also,
totally, even
it's
that.
true, yes, it does.
Benefit.
So there's a multitude of things that people can do if you set your mind to it. And the change is slow and time consuming.
It is.
But it's
When
fine.
did you start to do this?
Well, I actually started on living healthier about 5 years ago when I took the summer off, and I worked my butt off around the house. And I lost a lot of weight. I was almost 300 pounds at one point in my life. Yeah.
What do you weigh now?
I'm under 200.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you've come a long way, Dave.
Yeah. The sugar hit me by surprise. I did not expect that at all. But it's the determination you're talking about. And I lost 50 pounds one summer, and I said, wow, this is too good to give up. And it's been a process over the last 5 years of eating healthier. And it's, you overcome the financial part of it, and you're on to a lot of things.
On the financial part, there's another way to look at it too, because when I was at one point, I had multiple breast cysts and tumors, and I went to a naturopathic doctor and went on an anti-inflammatory diet, and that was actually what led me into holistic health. That was the first step. But what I looked at is, okay, am I going to pay the price of these supplements and these healthy foods?
Yes.
Or am I going to pay the copay of having breast cancer and all of the pain and agony and uncertainty and disability that goes with it? Right. So it's about, sometimes spending a little more on prevention and having less illness. I'm never sick anymore.
Yeah, that's what
I don't even use insurance, and I take no prescription medications. So I have insurance, but I never use it. So I think that the cost, yes, it's a hurdle when you're making the change and you're learning how to do it, but understand that you're saving yourself money long term, not being disabled and unhealthy and having to pay for insulin shots and pills and all of the disability that goes with long-term type 2 diabetes, and especially with high weight. People have neuropathy and have a lot of side effects from that. So what you're doing is really saving your life.
Exactly, right.
And enabling you to be healthy.
I tell everyone, I haven't had a headache in 3 years. I haven't taken Motrin or aspirin or anything in 3 years. I haven't had a cold. I haven't been sick. One incident that happened this summer but had nothing to do with any of that. But that's, the savings in that alone is phenomenal. Yeah.
And let's see, you started tracking everything that you ate?
Yeah, that was part of the process also, because I was trying to figure what happened we started out with this diet and it wasn't working, to get the blood sugar. And one of the things that tipped us off that there was a problem, a serious problem the other way, was I took a whey protein muscle milk drink,
thinking it was healthy.
Thinking it was healthy. Well, it shot my blood sugar down so fast. In a matter of 20 minutes, I went down 200 points. Woo. And that's when we hit this diet that should be good for everybody wasn't working for me. It was
Because
doing
of the dairy allergy.
Dairy allergy,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So,
So undiagnosed allergies can be a big issue.
yes, there
absolutely,
you go.
yeah.
That's kind of a big thing, to dig deeper into this thing. Sometimes you'll find that your sugar problem may be a result of something else other than just your pancreas not operating properly, and that's what happened with my part of the thing.
Okay. And so, so you cut out carbs,
Yes.
sugars, all dairy, added some herbs and protein powder, and you avoid red meat.
Yes. I actually find it's funny. I started the red meats many years ago, and I love meat. There's nothing like a good steak to me, or a pot roast. And so the thing, what I noticed is it stayed in my system way too long. I felt lethargic and heavy.
You weren't digesting it right.
Yeah, and still to this day, we tried a little quick thing one time to see if I still had the problem, and I do. And I gained like 3 pounds. Couldn't lose it for a week.
What blood type are you?
You really don't know what blood type I am.
Okay,
I should.
Well, some of us have blood types that we should eat more vegetarian, and others
Yeah.
are meat eaters, and they have stronger stomach acid. And I'm an A, and that's more of a vegetarian, and I don't digest red meat very well,
Yeah.
and it gives me horrible body odor.
Yeah.
Within 48 hours of eating red meat, I can't stand how I smell.
Okay.
Nobody else can smell it, but I can. It drives me crazy. And I know that I'm just not digesting it properly. So, so what are your results? What changes have you seen? Where's your blood sugar? Give us
Well,
the
I
good
think
news.
she knows the exact
Okay,
number
here it is.
better than
Okay,
I do,
so-
but I started out way up in the 200s, high 200s, and
Yeah.
brought it down to, go ahead,
It
Gwen.
didn't take you very long at all. I mean,
No.
I have to say, Mr. Fuller has inspired me and really taught me the potential here. I mean, in terms of where I saw his blood sugars when he first began, I was very concerned. And
What were they? Do you remember?
In the upper 200s.
Okay.
So, and even fasting blood sugars in the upper
Yeah.
upper 190s,
190s, yeah.
200s ish. And after making a bunch of these changes, it was only really after about a month and a half that we started to
2
see
months
those
at the
come
most,
in.
I'd say, yeah.
Yeah. And then you started having your fasting blood sugars came down to 90, in the 90s.
90s, yeah.
And then even after eating, you were having more in the 120s, which is, considered normal.
Yeah.
And hemoglobin A1C dropped significantly. I actually didn't even want to redo it because hemoglobin A1C is an average over 3 months.
Right.
And so I didn't really even want to redo it right away. But you were already having such great changes where I was like, okay, sure, we'll do it. And I mean, that's some colleagues have seen that and just been like, wow. I'm actually not recalling the numbers right now, but I believe it was like 8.9 at
8.9 was my high.
and then you came down right into 6.3, was it 6.4?
Yeah, somewhere a little low 6 or high 5s, was
Yeah.
it? Maybe.
We should be doing
I
it
was-
again because I think
yeah.
it's coming. I know it's lower than that as well at this point. So
You got to realize I track my blood sugar like 10 times a day. My fingers are, and because I had to know, I wanted to know what was going on and why it was going on and everything. And then I'd bring this novel to her and say, "Here, read this." I can't read it. I'm gonna have to copy and read it later.
exactly. I go
And
through it all.
it became so I did big triangles of this is what I ate all day. I wasn't going to write it again. But
Well, what I like about the two of you is that what I hear is a great collaboration between, and
Yeah.
that's what I work with my naturopathic doctor, who's Deidre O'Connor, has been my doctor for 17 years through my whole healing of stopping breast cysts and tumor growth, ending my bipolar mood swings, and dealing with a lot of food allergies that were undiagnosed and horrible digestion. So it's a process, but what I tell people is start with the crisis. Solve the crisis first, get that under control, and then work into the other things that you discover in that process that are
exactly,
not working very well. And so we have about 4 minutes to go, and so I want to ask you, Dave, do you have, what advice do you have for other diabetics?
I would say I know it's hard in the medical world to do this. You only have so much time you can spend with your doctor, but if you ever get the opportunity to dig deeper, dig deeper, and it could be something else. And I don't know that insulin is necessarily the answer for everybody. You know, insulin shots and pills, and
It's a last resort, not the first.
Right, it shouldn't be the first thing. And there were a lot of people that told me that that's where I should be at, and I said no. And I say, basically, there's a lot you can do with your diet and exercise. That is true. There's no getting around it. That's probably one of the key things. But dig deeper. You know, maybe it is not that, like we started to talk about, just a pancreatic thing or something or other that's going on. You could have something going on there that really could change your life. And that's motivation enough to keep going. I know I'm not going to go back to eating the way that I ate before.
And that's the wonderful thing, is that once you start feeling healthy and feeling different, and I'm losing 100 pounds to say, that's it becomes self-motivating and self-fulfilling, is that you want to feel that. You now know how it feels to feel good and to have energy, and you want to continue it. So that becomes your motivation to take the next step.
Exactly.
Right.
That's the best message you could give to people, is really the hope, and you create your own hope. And don't pay attention to what anybody else says. Your body does tell you a lot. You know?
And listen to your inner knowing.
Yeah, that's right, what your body's telling you.
Yes, and what you know in your intuition, too. Your intuition said, I don't want to do that.
Right, exactly, yeah.
So,
and they're great people down there in Naturopathic. They really are. They're awesome.
Yes. And they laugh a lot, too.
It's true. There's a lot of laughing.
Well, I appreciate you, Gwenn, the work that you're doing, Dr. Rosenberg, and I really appreciate you coming, Dave, and sharing your story with our viewers. I'm sure you will inspire many people with the hope, just the hope of knowing that they could lose 100 pounds and regain their health and not have to, and just through diet and exercise and living more healthy process.
And it doesn't mean you have to hit the gym every single morning. It's just a normal, brisk day of walking will do a lot for a person.
It does.
Too.
It does. You don't have to have equipment. You've got legs.
Yes, exactly.
All right. I want to thank all of you for joining us these past 3 months during this fall 2014 season of Restoring Health Holistically. And I'm also very grateful for Channel 12 for enabling us to bring you this information that we have in these shows. If you've missed a few episodes, please tune in during this winter, because they often rerun the shows where they have open time slots. And I'm wishing all of you a most healthy and happy new year. Good night.